as well. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce, can you believe it, panel 9, our actual final formal panel of the symposium. And so following on from that great discussion about finance for science, we're now going to be talking about marine genetic resources, science and equity. And I'd love to invite Janice Trotte-Duha, who will be chairing this session for us. Janice is Director of Infrastructure and Operations at INPO, and she has a great panel. Many of you who are here in person, please make your way up to the stage, and also our online panelists as well. So come on over, and I'll hand over to you, Janice. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, actually, not good morning anymore. Dear colleagues from the audience, and from our audience remotely connected, it is indeed a great honor for me to serve as your moderator at panel 9, entitled Marine Genetic Resources, Science and Equity, two buzzwords, the very last one of this highly successful third BBNJ Symposium program. So I'm Janice Trotte-Duha, as my colleague just said, and I'm the Director of Infrastructure and Operations of INPO. Most of you know what INPO is all about, but my job at the Institute is to concentrate on what is the scientific infrastructure that we need for the good scientific results that we need to achieve. It's not an easy job, but I'm very delighted to be doing that. Our goal in this panel is to explore ways on how to promote access and fair, equitable sharing of benefits deriving from marine genetic resources. Not only to those possessing technological or economic capacity to access the high seas, but giving voice and action to those that have had little or never had it. So this is essentially what part 5 of the BBNJ agreement focuses on: capacity building, transfer of marine technology. And it's the treaty's built-in mechanism to ensure developing states can actually do the science and not only just benefit share from the others. MGRs, as we call it, marine genetic resources, sit at the intersection of the cutting-edge science, conservation, and global equity, like many other colleagues have already mentioned before me. So emerging tools such as eDNA are transforming our understanding and governance of MGRs. But how do we implement concrete actions and activities in those vast regions of the planet, respecting the principles of equity and sustainability? What sort of mechanism would ensure equitable participation of developing countries in practice? Would capacity building bridge those disparities? Do we have a roadmap to take us to the right destination? Well, this is what brings us here. And to answer some fundamental questions, I have a top-notch team of experts that most certainly will contribute to translating policy into science and science into action, and vice versa. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to my dear panelists here. Next to me, we have Manuela Miranda, Henri de Novion, Bopi Monbingu, did I get it right? Monbingu? Okay, thank you. And Hugo Sarmento, but also my colleagues afar, Dr. Adriana Borgiato, Dr. Claudio Chiarola, and Dr. Robert Blasiak. I will give a brief introduction to each of them, even though I don't think they would need any introduction for the role they represent in the BBNJ scenario. So let me start asking Dr. Adriana Broggiato if she's online with us. Dr. Adriana, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm online. I hope you can hear me.
Thank you so very much for being with us. Dr. Adriana holds a PhD in international law, and she joined the European Commission, DG MAR, in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, to work in the UE team that has negotiated the legally binding instrument on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ. Before we start with your interventions, let me brief you. We are very tight in time, so I am able to give 4 minutes at the most to each of you, because I do wish we have time for questions. And I would hope that I would have the opportunity to have a 1-minute speech from each of you by the end of our conversation here. So, Dr. Adriana, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for organizing. I will try to go to the point and be brief. So I have to answer from the EU perspective what key measures are needed to bridge the gap between scientific knowledge and policy. And also, as we heard from the intervention in the introduction, the focus is also on new technology, eDNA, and conservation genetics. So I would like also to start from the basic of the objective of the treaty, which is conservation and sustainable use. So eDNA and conservation genetic are basic knowledge, which are shaping, of course, the MGR part. But it has always been a EU position, but the MGR part is crucial for the implementation of the whole treaty, so for ABMT and EIA especially. So in terms of gap between science and policy, my recommendation would be to raise awareness of scientists for their role in implementation and also their engagement in the process that is starting with the entering into force of a treaty, where their expertise will be very valuable. It's important to ensure that a certain science policy platform, very efficient, is embedded through the work of a subsidiary body, especially the STB and the ABS committee. So it's important to ensure at PrepCon3 to have a smooth setting up of subsidiary bodies and avoid politicization of the scientific one through the rules of procedure and the election of the members. My suggestion is also to focus on the treaty text, which is quite innovative on the obligation to deposit samples and DSI in publicly available repositories according to Article 14.3, which is the nutshell of a beneficiary to enlarge access to marine genetic resources and DSI. So also to I would say to address the gap that was mentioned in the beginning between the few countries and the rest of the world, the few countries that have the technologies to go and samples. So to address the main gap in equity, it's important that the subsidiary bodies will develop guidance are needed on what is a publicly available repository, especially for physical sample, and also their visibility in the framework of the BBNJ, because this will be crucial for accessing them and for real access to MGR and DSI. The second question that was posed to me is if we need a more specific benefit sharing framework for the scientific community of the Global South. So the most important things is, in my view, is that the scientists from the Global South should be, as they have been so far, very actively engaged in the subsidiary bodies and in any scientific policy interface pertaining to the agreement. Their role is fundamental because it's important to have them on board for needs assessment for capacity building, but should be a bottom-up approach. An important element would be the change in the mentality in the way science is done, a change in the way capacity building is conceived in marine sciences. So in order to achieve a decolonization of science and democratization of science, which there are lots of experts beyond my experience, and involvement of scientific expert on equal footing in shaping, for example, the research question and deciding on the technology to employ, and also in being the principal investigator of this big project. This will require a change in mentality, which is very important in my personal opinion, and this practice can be facilitated through the BBNJ agreement. I don't have the magic stick to have all the answer, but I think this is something very important to go back to the introductory speech, to give voice to developing countries, scientists that can do science. The EU, as you know, has not waited for the special fund to be operationalized to give support for capacity building for the BBNJ agreement, and we have allocated 40 million euro to the Global Ocean Program over 6 years, which is focusing on supporting both ratification and also implementation, so also scientific activities. This is managed by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, and consists in 10 million at the moment demand technical facility. So there is a workshop tomorrow on site, which is organized for this, on building a clearinghouse mechanism for knowledge and technology exchange, where you will find the person from IUCN in charge of this program, which can explain how to accede to this technical facility, which are also available for strengthening capacity, science and technology related to the implementation of a BBNJ agreement. So other action within this global ocean program will also be dedicated specifically to marine genetic resources in the future to strengthen center of excellences and biorepositories, which are going back to my point before. This would foster the capability to conserve and use marine genetic resources, so again fostering access, real access to marine genetic resources of areas beyond national jurisdiction. And I finished my 4 minutes.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Ariana Borgiato, for providing us with those precious reflections that only provide the concept that we all agree that we need to give voice to those developing nations to do research with those more developed. Thank you. Let me then move on to Dr. Claudio Chiarola. He's the legal officer of CGIAR, Genie Bank Initiative. He holds a PhD from Queen Mary University of London, and he supported the team of independent international legal advocates on BBNJ issues, if I'm not mistaken, in the context of the negotiations leading to the adoption of the BBNJ. So, Dr. Claudio, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Janice, and just let me say that it is truly a pleasure and an honor to contribute to this third BBNJ symposium at this critical time for the implementation of the agreement. So I'm going to share a few reflections on how capacity building under the BBNJ agreement can help to bridge global disparities in marine genetic resource research and improve the science policy interface. But firstly, I would like to emphasize that the BBNJ agreement is the first and the only legally binding treaty that provides for the sharing of benefits from the utilization of digital sequence information, and it does so in tandem with marine genetic resources in its operative provision. So I believe this is a major innovation, and this makes this treaty forward-looking and progressive, and it sets it apart from any other treaty and legal instrument that we have currently available in the global space. Secondly, the agreements define capacity building broadly as the creation and enhancement of human financial management, scientific and technological, organizational, institutional, and other capabilities. This comprehensive understanding it's essential because disparities in MGR and DSI research arise not just from technical and technological gaps, but also from limited human resources, institutional and regulatory capacities. Now, moving on to capacity building as such, it is a key objective of Part 2, besides having its own dedicated pillar in Part 4, of course, of the agreement. So it's a key objectives of Part 2 on marine genetic resources, together with benefit sharing, the generation of knowledge and scientific understanding, technological innovation, and the transfer of marine technologies. Importantly, capacity building itself is a form of non-monetary benefit sharing. Under Part 2, there are several institutional arrangements and mechanisms that help operationalize these commitments. The clearinghouse mechanism, first, will function as a centralized open access platform for sharing information on marine genetic resources. And obviously, this is directly connected to the obligations that relate to notifications under Article 12. It will also help matching capacity building needs with available support and technology providers, improve transparency, and facilitate collaboration. For instance, the notifications that are provided for in Article 12 should outline opportunities for scientists to participate or be represented in projects or cruises, and should indicate also how technical assistance needs can be addressed to facilitate participation from developing countries. Financing is another central pillar. Of course, we just talked about it in the previous session. And just to recall that the initial benefit sharing modality envisaged by that is envisaged by the agreement provides that developed parties will make annual contributions to the special fund at the rate of 50% of their assessed contribution to the budget. So together, these contributions should provide some predictable seed money to kickstart implementation support for Part 2 of the agreement. The most relevant types of capacity building and technology transfer, which are envisaged in a long list in Annex 2 to the agreement itself, include indeed developing and strengthening scientific infrastructure, acquiring essential equipment for research and development, including data management. And of course, in this context, we should consider economies of scales, which could be exploited by establishing or strengthening regional centers of excellence, such as genomic or bioinformatics hubs. Institutional strengthening and improved national regulatory frameworks are also very important. Next steps should emphasize bottom-up needs assessment at national, sub-regional, and regional levels to ensure that support is demand-driven and that priorities, whether infrastructure, training, technologies, or financing, are clearly identified. And then to conclude, again, this mechanism should make it possible for a broad range of states and stakeholders to generate, access, and use scientific information on MGR and DSI, and by improving transparency, participation, scientific capacity, they will help ensure that evidence meaningfully inform policy decisions, including the required prioritization of needs and technical assistance to address them. Thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Claudio. We are already 5 minutes behind schedule, so we have to concentrate on our time. Without any further comments, let me introduce you to Dr. Robert Blasiak. He's an associate professor at the Stockholm Resilience Center at the Stockholm University, where he has led research programs on ocean stewardship, marine biology, marine genetic resources, among others. His current work focuses on the peace-building potential of ocean science collaboration. So, Dr. Robert Blasiak, again, it's a great pleasure to see you on screen once more. We met last year in one of the summer schools that INPO has hosted. Right. So thank you so very much for joining us today. If I may, let me ask you, from your perspective, could emerging tools such as eDNA and new coalitions built around shared and equitable measures help bridge the gap between science and policy in implementation of the BBNJ agreement? Thank you. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Janice. And I'm so sorry. Now we're meeting the second time, and again, not in person. I hope next time it is in person. And I will put your mind at ease. Claudio and Ariana already covered a lot of the points I was going to make, so I'll keep it really short. But I first want to look into the past before looking into the future. So in the past is 20 years of discussion about BBNJ. And during this time, we realized we need to bring everyone along. That's why it took so long. We needed to put every issue into this agreement so that everyone feels there's something in there for them, not just picking the favorite topics of a few countries. Now we have the agreement. That's the thing I've celebrated along with all of you. But now I also see headline after headline that says, marine protected areas, here we come. $50 million in funding for marine protected areas in the high seas. And I look at this and I want to celebrate, and it makes me happy, but it also makes me nervous. Because I look at that and I think, we're losing our connections. We're focusing, we're getting tunnel vision on one topic. We need to make sure we keep these connections. And I think marine genetic resources, capacity building and transfer of marine technology, and this commitment to equity, that's the connective tissue across the BBNJ agreement, and we can never forget it. So when we talk about marine protected areas, and I think Angelique was mentioning this at the end of the last panel, it's going to be really expensive to have a really strong foundation for understanding the boundaries of these protected areas and then also monitoring the impacts over time. And I think a lot of the best tools that we have for that are going to be genetic tools, monitoring, passive monitoring systems, but also vessels that are going out, collecting samples, sequencing. And you mentioned eDNA, Janice, and this is one of the most exciting ones because DNA in the water column, it'll degrade in just a few hours or a few days. So when you collect a sample from the water and you find eDNA that's from a certain organism, it's almost like a snapshot that you know it was there recently. For instance, a large marine mammal or something like this. So I think building up the capacity of different countries to monitor eDNA in these areas that are becoming prospective MPA sites, I think that'll be a really important one, and it keeps marine genetic resources, capacity building, transfer of marine technology, all right there, even with this kind of this sexy topic that is so popular in the media and among philanthropies and others. And I think it's also really important to think of the high seas as an area where science can be done together, but then all the scientists, they don't live there, they go home. So they bring that capacity home with them. And a lot of countries, they desperately need that capacity within their own exclusive economic zones, not just for monitoring the biodiversity, but for all of the efforts that will trigger the start of a blue economy or the growth of a blue economy within their own national jurisdictions. So I think investments in capacity building in areas beyond national jurisdiction should be seen in that more holistic framing, that it's going to contribute to all of the outcomes of the BBNJ agreement and then have a broader impact also on a sustainable blue economy around the world into the future. So I think keeping that big picture framing is going to be crucial as we go forward. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Robert. Once again, it's been incredibly interesting to hear your voice and bring your wisdom to our discussions. Thank you so very much. Let me then move on. We've sort of got some savings in time. Let me move on to Dr. Manuela Pessoa de Miranda. Dr. Manuela holds a PhD in biology and a master's degree in agriculture. That's very interesting. She's the secretary of the Commission on Genetic Resources at FAO and has more than 20 years of experience within the UN system. In your career, you have been devoted to strengthening commitment to biodiversity and sustainable development, and we thank you so very much. Now tell us, Manuela, FAO and other UN agencies will play an important role in supporting governments and stakeholders to translate the BBNJ agreement into action. Can you provide us with some thoughts and views with regard to what the top priorities for intergovernmental organizations is likely to be coming in the coming years to operationalize part 2 of BBNJ? Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you all the organizers and you for being here. Before I answer the question, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathering here today on the ancestral lands of 2 indigenous peoples that used to occupy this area. They are the Tupinambá and Temiminó peoples of Brazil. I pay my respects to their past, present, and future generations. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. I will try to answer this question. The UN is a very large organization, as you know, with many mandates and areas of action. So I will zero in the work of FAO, and in particular, the Commission on Genetic Resources, which is an intergovernmental body with 179 members, so nearly universal membership. The Commission addresses policy, implementation, capacity building, much of what we've been discussing so far in relation to all types of genetic resources and biodiversity for food and agriculture. Now, you may be thinking, okay, the BBNJ agreement does not really cover fisheries, which is a big part of FAO's work, but it does cover research and development, as we all know. And much of that will be relevant for agri-food systems. So production of food, bio-inputs for agriculture, veterinary products, and so on and so forth. These are all within the mandate of the Commission on Genetic Resources, and it also addresses ABS and DSI that have been discussed here, and this is very important for our discussion today. So I hope that I've convinced you, if you weren't convinced yet, that there is much in common between the mandate of the Commission on Genetic Resources and the implementation of the BBNJ agreement. In particular, we work always thinking what's our end goal, and that's 3 pillars. One is the biodiversity itself, to protect those genetic resources, but also to improve food security and livelihoods of so many people that depend on those genetic resources. And that includes the custodians of genetic resources that are in part indigenous peoples, local communities, and in our context here, fisher folks. So I just wanted to mention that to put things into context before I address your question more directly. So there are 2 main pillars of priorities that, or areas of priorities that the Commission is beginning to address in the context of supporting the implementation of the BBNJ agreement. And that's policy development and capacity development that we've already spoken a lot here. So I will focus a little more on the policy development side. And what we do, we work primarily at the global level, but we also support, we provide support to members at national level as well as at the local level. At the global level, we develop policy documents, a number of policy documents, voluntary guidelines, and these are global plans of action, for example, that where the 179 members come together and they actually adopt those. So there is a commitment to implement those, and we provide support for the implementation at national level. So this is one path. It hasn't been decided yet, but it's something that may happen in the near future, that the Commission requests the development of a global plan of action for marine genetic resources or something similar, such as voluntary guidelines, codes, and standards. In terms of national implementation, we foresee, and much was said already, I will not repeat, but I wanted to highlight that countries will need to adapt and adopt new legislation to take into account the BBNJ agreement. So their ABS frameworks at national level need to be adjusted. One key point for countries is having coherence between the different ABS instruments that they are signatories to. So we hope to be able, because we also work across these other instruments, namely the Nagoya Protocol, but also WIPO and so on, we hope to be able to provide that support that countries need. Another area that we foresee, and it's both policy development but also capacity building, is the readiness to contribute and to comply with the obligations in relation to the clearinghouse mechanism, namely the notification requirements. and this will require quite a bit of capacity building, as we heard already. Also, FPIC, the free prior informed consent, we heard before from the previous speakers in the previous days, the importance of FPIC in the context of the BBNJ agreement. And it's a new area for the work of the Commission, but we are working with very strong partners. And that brings me also to the local level that we also work on. We work primarily with academic institutions and indigenous peoples' organizations. And we are developing, I'll just single out one example. We are starting to work on biocultural community protocols in relation to genetic resources. If you think of FPIC traditionally, it's always been, or at least for most countries, it relates to the land. It relates to, for example, the extractive industry. It's either forestry or it is mining, for example, and obtaining the free prior informed consent from the relevant indigenous peoples in relation to those activities. So there is this need to adapt, for countries to adapt, for governments to adapt their FPIC provisions or to include new provisions that will also account for coastal communities, indigenous peoples that are the custodians of the marine genetic resources, the associated knowledge to marine genetic resources. So I think that's all. We have...
We're a little bit late with your slide, but it's there. Okay. It's going to be... At a point, we're going to have Dr. Manuela's slide projected. And it's important because it bears a QR code that people could get information from. So we are running late, but we will not finish the session without your slide.
Okay.
I promise.
Let me just say a few more words. Contact me. This is the last, but I hope not least, of the panels for this incredible symposium. But so once the QR code is up and on the screen, it's basically information on how to contact us. If you are interested in these topics that I mentioned, but more broadly in the relationship between marine genetic resources and agri-food systems, I would be very happy to hear from you, and also including the biocultural community protocols. If there are some organizations here that work with those, bringing science and indigenous peoples and traditional knowledge together, I would be happy to speak with you. So let's try to see if you can get that slide up.
Yeah, I would just have to move on because we're running short in time. But by the end of the... Oh, there you go. It's in now on the screen. This is the slide that we should have projected as Dr. Manuela was speaking. But in any case, by the end of the panel, I promise we'll project it again for those that did not have the time to copy the QR code. Okay, thank you so very much. Let me move on. We are running really behind schedule. I wish to now invite Dr. Henry Denovion. Did I spell it right? Denovion. Voila. Head of the Genetic Heritage Department of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, which acronym is MMA, as we call it in Brazil. Dr. Henry has a multiple folder career. He has worked in many institutions under the UN system, as well as in the national and subnational governments in Africa, Asia, Europe, South America, including indigenous peoples' organizations. Welcome to the floor, and please give us this repertoire of recommendations that you certainly, with your experience, will be able to provide us.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Marie. Thank you, my dear friend Andrei, for the invitation and for having me here. Thank you, Janice, for your kind introduction. And since I want to be your friend, I took the liberty to draft a less than a 4-minute statement, and I wish to, with your indulgence, read it so we can still be friends. So the adoption of the BBNJ represents a historic step for international environment governance, For the first time, an international instrument addresses marine genetic resources and digital sequence information, the DSI, within the same normative infrastructure. However, since the agreement was adopted, the global governance landscape has evolved significantly, particularly under the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD. Since at its last meeting, the COP adopted a very important decision, Decision 16/2, which established the multilateral mechanism for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of DSI, as well as the creation of the Cali Fund. From my perspective, this development fundamentally changes the implementation context of the BBNJ agreement. Paragraph 27 of Decision 16/2 explicitly invites relevant international instruments and organizations to seek coherence and mutual supportiveness with the multilateral mechanism on DSI. In other words, we are now entering a phase where institutional interoperability will be as important as legal innovation. In addition, paragraph 18 of the same decision contains an important message, which is the recognition that it recognizes the possibility that existing international processes, such as BBNJ, may use the financial window created under the multilateral mechanism on DSI as well. So in practical terms, this opens a potential pathway for the BBNJ agreement to make use of the Cali Fund infrastructure as part of its broader benefit-sharing ecosystem. This is a particularly interesting opportunity because rather than building entirely separate financial infrastructure, the BBNJ regime could just expand the use of this window, allowing contributions from BBNJ, from monetary benefit sharing, to interact with the global mechanism already established under the CBD. Such an approach would strengthen coherence, reduce administrative fragmentation, and amplify the global impact of benefit sharing resources. The challenge before us is therefore not only legal implementation, but systemic coordination. And without coordination, we risk fragmentation, multiple reporting system, duplicative benefit sharing expectations, and inconsistent signals to the scientific community and private sector at the same time. Such fragmentation could undermine both scientific openness and fairness in benefit sharing, but if we succeed, the opportunities are remarkable. The BBNJ agreement and the CBD's multilateral mechanism are structurally complementary. Together, these frameworks can create a coherent global infrastructure for benefit sharing in the age of genomic science. From an implementation perspective, several opportunities for harmonization emerge. First, alignment of benefit sharing modalities. Second, shared transparency in reporting systems. And third, strategic allocation of benefits. Finally, there is an opportunity to normative coherence. The recognition that genetic resources and DSI are part of the same value chain reflects the realities of modern biology, ensuring that international instruments operate coherently across this continuum will be essential for both equity and scientific progress. In this sense, it's my opinion that BBNJ agreement should not be seen as operating in isolation, but as a part of a broader emerging ecosystem of global biodiversity governance. To conclude, if we manage this coordination carefully, we can transform what might appear as institutional complexity into a resilient and mutually reinforcing system. So a system that would support science, promote fairness, and mobilize resources for biodiversity conservation worldwide, which are both objectives of those two instruments. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for your...
I'm still a friend of you?
Yeah, of course. Always. We need you. We need you so very much. And we like very much, I like very much your expression of the need to harmonize different legal instruments. It's really going to be a challenge. Rao, so moving on to Bupi Mwambengu. Buppy is in partnerships, is partnership manager at Basecamp Research UK, and she's currently devoted to examining barriers to equitable partnerships in bio-innovation research. This is great. Welcome, and please give us your views on that subject, and restrain yourself to 4 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try and accept the challenge. I'm not very good. I'm an African, so. First, I want to say thank you to the organizers for including me again after Singapore last year. I'm fairly new to this space. I think it's second year in a row now I'm making an appearance, but like Henry, I'm mainly usually on the CBD side of things, operationalizing Nagoya Protocol through those collaboration partnerships for access for biodiscovery and bioinnovation in private sector. So as the only private sector representative in the room, I hope you don't shoot the messenger. But I had a few points that I wanted to share with you, many of which colleagues across the week have shared. We've heard them all, so I will just kind of highlight on the ground reality of implementing the decisions that many of you have spent years making as part of these treaties and policies. So for me, number one, as a partnership manager for Basecamp, 5 years now, actually identifying collaborative partners to enter into these biodiscovery projects together, and also identifying needs through those capacity building collaborations and requirements and needs. I want to just touch on the fact that our experiences are not perfect, so by no means hold that against me and say, you said. It's been very much a journey, a discovery journey with our partners. We are learning as we're doing, and we started doing this long before the BBNJ was a thing. So 3 years ago, prior to the BBNJ, we had, for example, 2 partnerships in the marine discovery space. I'm happy to say one of those is Script. You all heard from Margaret this morning. And the other one is with Malta Heritage and Malta as our partner. Both of those collaborations are at least 3 years old, and they're ongoing. Initially, we started as a 3-year term, but the benefits already have been realized by both sides, private and the public institutions themselves, and we've decided to make them an ongoing process. So I will be touching on some of those key areas of development that have benefited us. So number one, infrastructure investment. I want to touch on that and refer to the funding conversations that were being held by the panel before us, which was panel 8, and just highlight and say, when we talk about funding, often the mindset is still funding as a donation or a grant or a donor money from the government or a budget set from the innovation and science and technology ministries. But when it comes to private sector, for us, when we invest in a partnership, this is a return is expected. So those are usually 2 areas that as a partnership manager, I spend a lot of time trying to explain during those negotiations of structuring and forming a partnership, is to try to get everybody aligned that this funding that is coming as part of this partnership needs to be returned to our investors in one way or the other. So bankable projects and partnerships and collaboration, what does that actually mean is that we must be thinking outside the box and looking to develop funding mechanism that have a de-risking factor, that it is an entrepreneurship almost thinking mind, business acumen, that how do we make this funding sustainable and therefore not at the end of the 2 years or 5 years that we've agreed to work together, suddenly then everything dies because the funding is ended and then there's nothing else happening. And the equipment then just starts gathering dust because there's no money to buy reagents or consumables and so forth and so forth. The other priority is the multi-regional shared facility idea that you've also heard from other colleagues. Now, for us at Basecamp, we realized that when we are sharing back benefits with our partners, it has to go beyond a share of the revenue that we are generating from the discovery or from data usage from coming out of these collaborations. We started looking, and we've incorporated that in our business model, is the priority of unlocking the potential of creating multiple hubs around the world where everybody is able to take part, so that inclusivity in the biodiscovery, and that is being realized by the partnerships that we're setting. So currently, Basecamp is in 29 countries. Not all of those, of course, have a marine biodiscovery program. However, we have, I would say, one third of those are. And therefore, through those collaborations, which are usually with education institutions or research institutions, we are also training future scientists and project leaders who will be able to be used as trainers for other regions. And we have taken, for example, colleagues from Malta to go other parts of the world to hold conferences, to speak. We've done co-publications where we are sharing our experiences, and hopefully through that outreach element of our collaborations as well, we are starting to establish that multiple hubs, opportunity for regional shared facilities, that the tech transfer and the capacity building and the biodiscovery and the innovations can actually take place. We're also looking at areas of training, human capacity.
Sorry to interrupt. I just need you to wrap up.
Okay,
because we ran out
my
of time.
final point.
Thank you.
So on the human capacity and training, we have found working side by side with each other, you get the transfer of skills and tech flowing all direction, not just global north to global south, for example, but it's between scientists, and business colleagues. It's about the learning commercial advantages and opportunities that can be realized in some of the research activities that we're doing. Because often we focus in our own little safe boxes where I'm an academic, my priority is to publish a paper, or maybe to get a finding and share that with the world. And then we don't really try to cross the boundaries and start looking at how can that then be expanded to a sustainable ongoing program that could support the region or even across the continent in the case of Africa, where I focus most of my partnership activities in. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm here for the rest of the week.
Thank you,
so please
yes.
talk to me.
And we need to give our audience time for questions. Having said that, please note that we have a Slido that you can pose your questions as well. Without any further ado, Hugo, you're next door to me. I can pinch you if you don't stick to the 4 minutes.
Yes, I'm really close.
Hugo is a professor at the University Federal de São Carlos in Brazil, very renowned for your specialty, and his studies are directed to ocean microbiome. And you've taken part at the Tara Ocean Expedition, so give us some hint on how modern sequencing technologies could help scientists connect ocean microbiome diversity with environmental change. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, for the invitation. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So I will present, I'm a scientist, microbiome scientist, okay? I study microbes. And I will try to translate a little bit. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'll try to translate a little bit what we do, how we do it, and how it can be useful for conservation purposes, such as the BBNJ goals. Of course, I have to oversimplify because of time.
Please.
So when a person goes to a doctor, for example, he can take your temperature, your blood pressure, take some blood samples to figure out what's going on. That's what we do with DNA, okay? So we go to the ocean, we take samples as we saw the first day, I think. We connect it to the ship. We go to these big ships or smaller ships. We take samples at different depths. We filter a lot of water. So 100 liters of water is like cutting a whole forest into a piece of filter. We cannot do it in terrestrial, but we can do it in the ocean. And we put in a machine and you get the famous DSI, right? The DNA. So with this, we can sense the health of the environment. We can say if that part of the ocean is sick or not, okay? So, and how can this help us to conservation purposes? When we talk about conservation, usually on land again, we want to maximize the number of species that you conserve. You want to maximize the number of individuals to have genetic diversity and so on. But you also want to maximize the number of habitats. But how do you see an habitat in the ocean? And now forget a little bit about the ocean floor and the seamounts, which are quite obvious, but the water column, how can we characterize those habitats? So if I had a presentation, I would put now a picture of a landscape. You would see some vegetation, some trees, and you don't need to be a biologist to tell if that's a rainforest or a savanna or whatever, right? Then I change the picture to the ocean, to the open ocean, and you just say it's blue, right? So you can imagine that all the ocean is similar, is equal, is constant, but it is not. There are different habitats in the ocean, in the water column, when you see all these communities through the DNA lenses. It's like our camera to see the habitats, right? So this life, the life on this part of on the open ocean is primarily microbial, okay? 80 to 90% of the biomass are microbes, not only phytoplankton, but bacteria, phytoplankton, zooplankton, viruses, and so on. We can sense big mammals, but we also can see, that's a nice thing about DNA. We're not looking at the savanna only to see the lions or only seeing the elephants. We're seeing the whole community with DNA. So that's a very nice lenses to see the habitats in the ocean, okay? So for BBNJ, if we look to conservation purposes only on coastal habitat, with the knowledge that we have from coastal habitats or coastal species, will probably be insufficient. We'll have to have these tools to see what really matters to ecosystem services and ecosystem functioning, which are the microbes, okay? So I'm finishing.
Time flies, huh?
Yes. So effective MPAs require an ecosystem-wide understanding of open ocean biodiversity and processes. And for this, we must take into account the microbes and DNA sequence. I think I will answer the part of equity in the second part of the second round.
Well, thank you so very much, Hugo, for bringing us this comparison between the terrestrial and the oceanic environment. That's very interesting. We would have a 1-minute pitch. I don't think we'll be able to do it, but I'll read the question that I would ask them for their 1-minute pitch, and maybe the audience, and this is done to the benefit of the audience, would like to answer. The question would be, if you could prioritize one single transformative action towards equity and best use of genetic resources in areas beyond national jurisdiction, within the first years of implementation of BBNJ, what would that be? So this is the question that I pose to all. If there are no questions from the audience or from Slido, I would definitely defer back to my colleagues here at the podium. So right now, I think we do have some Slido questions, but I would give preference to the audience. Is there any question from the room? Yes, one question there. Amandine, please. 2 questions, okay. Yes, please. and tell us who would you wish to have it replied to.
Hi everyone, so Amandine from Ocean Pact. We are a partner of INPO, and currently we are working on cooperating and building together a call to action to actually address one of the main gaps for eGNA technology, which is having a genetic reference bank. And so this question maybe is more for Robert and Hugo, because I think you're the specialist. So yeah, we know that there is a big gap, especially for the South Atlantic. So we are trying to address this and unlock this potential. My question is, what are the funding pathways for such a coordinated action and a need that has the potential to address one of the main barriers of this type of technology? And the second question is about the technology itself. I would like to hear from you if you think this is, eGNA is gonna revolutionize how we monitor biodiversity, or if it's going to be used mainly as a complementary tool, and if yes, what type of other tools that are more complementary with eGNA? Thank you.
Thank you, Amandine. Robert, can we start with you? 30 seconds.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I just start on the first question and then pass to Hugo. I would go straight to the Schmidt Ocean Institute, actually, because I know they've been doing some really remarkable work in partnership with Argentina and Brazil and others in the region already on things like this. And I think that there's a very simple and compelling story to tell to philanthropy. If you want your marine protected areas, if you want them to be good, if you want them to deliver results, if you want to be able to understand those results, then this is the way. Build the libraries so that when you do sampling, you're able to know what's actually in this area. So I think it's storytelling.
Thank you, Robert. Hugo?
Okay, so thanks for the question. I think this is already a revolution, is already happened. I mean, there's no way back. There are inequalities in infrastructure and access to this kind of technologies. Thanks to a European project, for example, Atlanteco, that funded South Africa and Brazil as well, we could put a facility at UFSCar. We can reproduce Star Ocean's protocols at UFSCar. But when I contact to the community, it's very hard to find people that actually can deal with this type of data. So one bottleneck is not only the infrastructure, is the human capacity. Experts make a community, a regional community is a challenge. And just to finish, in the tropics, we have two drawbacks. We have, in order to use eDNA, you have to have banks, take the organisms and make the banks with the barcode of this organism. We are very late to that because we don't have the technology, and our biodiversity is very high. So it's easy to sequence 100 species, but when you have 3,000 species, so we have two difficulties here in the tropical region to address, I think. So I hope that BBNJ what's the name that splits the money of the royalties? Benefit sharing, sorry. Yeah. I'm bad with
I like that. You started with the description and then you came to the name. That's good.
I hope that this mechanism will help to get in that way. I think the mix, the low middle income countries will benefit from it.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. I think we have one last question from Slido. There has been no mention of marine taxonomists needed to help determine what genetic sequences are. Does this need parallel BBNJ capacity development or not? Who wants to answer to that? Okay, please do.
So it's Ariana speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Ariana.
I appreciate a lot the question on what is genetic sequencing, and I just wanted to pick up on the intervention before that my friend Henry Novio made. So I just wanted to say that this was my pitch. The BBNJ is very innovative and transformative already because we have DSI in the scope in the treaty. So can you imagine a bunch of lawyers agreeing to a legally binding treaty on a scientific definition, without understanding? So I think that, okay, it was 4 in the morning, we worked 40 hours in a row, so we probably didn't understand anything more. But it's very important to understand the trust we had on science and on scientific experts to know what they could do with DSI in the treaty. So I think we should continue trusting the scientists, and the scientists are telling us that a multilateral approach to monetary benefit sharing on DSI is the option. So I really appreciate Henry Novio speaking about interoperability of institutions, and we need to get this right at PrepCon3 in ensuring that the special fund will be able to communicate with the Cali fund. I think this is very crucial for this important element of DSI. I close it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana, so very much. I think our time is out, so we cannot go any further. But let me pick up from all the different perspectives that we have heard here today. And I'm very pleased with the outcomes that we had from this very last panel. I will quote one of the sentences that some of our NASA colleagues, and we have a marine spatial enterprise here in BBNJ, and what they say is failure is not an option. Failure is not an option for BBNJ implementation. So we have to get all the bits and pieces that we have at the very beginning of it, without taking much time to get back on track and provide the results that we wish under this banner of the capacity building and the transfer of marine technology done. So let me thank you all my panelists. I think that we have fostered some ideas that are very important ones to help advance the scientific foundations for the effective implementation of the BBNJ agreement. So I thank all the audience and people from afar, and let me get a round of applause for our panelists. And I would ask for a picture. So please stay on screen. We will have a picture with you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Janice. I didn't even have to come and pinch you, so that was good. While you take your photo, I just want to let all the audience know that we are about to draw things to a close for the main symposium, but the day is certainly not over yet. When we break for lunch, we will use the lunch break to show our film tribute to Christina Gjerde again. So I know some of you have asked me about seeing that because you missed it yesterday. So please be back in the room for 2:15 and we'll play Christina's film again. After that, starting at 2:30, we have some great satellite events. There's 2 running hosted by the Sargasso Sea Commission in the observatory room. They are by invitation. But that means that for the rest of us, we can come back to the main auditorium for 2 absolutely fantastic events. The first one, hosted by IOC UNESCO, is about the UN Decade Ocean Event 2027 Brazil. All roads lead back to Rio, we should all say. And then at 4:30, to really conclude the program, we have a satellite event entitled A Climate Smart Pathway for BBNJ, and that's hosted by the Plymouth Marine Laboratory and a host of other organizations. So there's plenty more to come. But right now, it is time to reflect on the main symposium and draw it to a close. We have had 4 keynotes, 9 panels, 58 panelists, and will have had 10 satellite events, and hundreds of you attending in person and online. It's been a really fantastic 3 days.